Kia ora te whānau, e hukarati koa Andrew Doubleday aho. Today we're looking at the Gospel for Sunday the 4th of May 2025, which is John chapter 21 verses 1 through to 19. After these things, Jesus showed himself again to the disciples by the Sea of Tiberias, and he showed himself in this way. Gathered together were Simon Peter, Thomas called the twin, Nathanael of Cana in Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, and 2 others of his disciples. Simon Peter said to them, "I'm going fishing." They said to him, "We will go with you." They went out and got into the boat, and that night they caught nothing. Just after daybreak, Jesus stood on the beach, but the disciples did not know that it was Jesus. Jesus said to them, "Children, you have no fish, have you?" They answered him, "No." He said to them, "Cast the net to the right side of the boat, and you'll find some." So they cast it, and now they were not able to haul it in because there were so many fish. That disciple whom Jesus loved said to Peter, "It's the Lord." When Simon Peter heard that it was the Lord, he put on some clothes, for he was naked, and jumped into the sea. But the other disciples came in the boat, dragging the net full of fish, for they were not far from the land, only about 100 yards or so. When they'd gone ashore, they saw a charcoal fire there, with fish on it, and bread. Jesus said to them, "Bring some of the fish you have just caught." So Simon Peter went aboard and hauled the net ashore, full of large fish, 153 of them. And though there were so many, the net was not torn. Jesus said to them, Come and have breakfast." Now, none of the disciples dared to ask him, "Who are you?" because they knew it was the Lord. Jesus came and took the bread and gave it to them, and did the same with the fish. Now this was the 3rd time that Jesus appeared to his disciples after he was raised from the dead. When they'd finished breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" He said to him, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." Jesus said to him, "Feed my lambs." A 2nd time he said to them, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" He said to him, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." Jesus said to him, "Tend my sheep." He said to him the 3rd time, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" Peter felt hurt because he said this to him the 3rd time, "Do you love me?" And he said to him, "Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you." Jesus said to him, "Feed my sheep. Truly, I tell you, when you were younger, you used to fasten your own belt and go wherever you wished. But when you grow old, you will stretch out your hands, and someone else will fasten a belt around you and take you where you do not wish to go." He said this to indicate the kind of death by which he would glorify God. After this he said to him, "Follow me." So this forms the bulk of what we know as the epilogue of John's Gospel. The Gospel seems to finish at the end of chapter 20. And then we have this bit that kind of almost feels tacked on. And yet the interesting thing is that both the prologue, which is the first 18 verses of chapter 1, and the epilogue, which is chapter 21, are found in all existing manuscripts that we have of John's Gospel. So, although it may have that kind of tacked on feel about it, it is very much included in the total story. I've been thinking about the kind of modern day analogy of what it's like. And it kind of feels like what happens sometimes when you're sitting in a movie and you're watching the credits rolling at the end. And often they'll play outtakes from the movie. They'll play bloopers and scenes that weren't actually fully included. But occasionally they'll also show what happened after the movie. There's a couple of examples that I could think of. It's the disaster movie Armageddon, I think made during the 1990s, when there was an asteroid heading to the Earth and threatening to destroy human life. And Bruce Willis, the hero, goes up with his team and he manages to destroy it sufficiently that it goes different ways, but he himself dies. Now, his right-hand man survives. And as the credits are rolling, you're seeing him getting married to the daughter of Bruce Willis. And you know that there's a kind of ongoing happy ending beyond the movie. Another one I think of is The Two Popes, as this movie portrays fictionally the interchange between Benedict, who resigned from his papacy, and Francis, who was taking on the new role. And at the very end, as the credits are running, you see them both sitting there together, the two popes. Now Francis is the Pope, and they're sitting together watching the 2014 World Football Cup. That's kind of nice way to conclude it. And it's kind of opposite, I think, as we notice that we're in that unusual place again where we're wondering who the next Pope will be, as Pope Francis has completed his run. He has run his race. He has finished the course. And like many, I think, I believe the man's done a good job. We're grateful for him. So here we have also this kind of, while the credits are being rolled, a completion of a story. The disciples had been told by the risen Christ when they were back in Jerusalem that they would need to go to Galilee and Jesus would meet them there. And there's a sense perhaps that Jesus hasn't shown up. He hasn't shown up early enough anyway. And Peter, still impatient, still impetuous, he needs to be distracted, and so he says, look, I'm going to go fishing. Because the thing is, it's something that he knows. And the others decide they also are looking for a bit of distraction because Jesus hasn't yet shown up, so they go with him. What this chapter does more than anything else is it tidies up Peter's storyline. Now, we already know from the resurrection accounts, both Luke and Paul tell us that both Peter and James, the brother of Jesus, who didn't believe in Jesus during his earthly ministry, had personal encounters with Jesus on that resurrection day. We're not given any clue as to what happened, as to what it was like. I could imagine for both of them, perhaps particularly Peter, a lot of tears were shed as he remembered his own failure and humiliation. And yet we see he's first into the water. He's keen to meet Jesus on this particular day. So a large part of that shame base within him has been attended to. What we see here, it occurs to me, is a mirroring of Peter's first encounter with Jesus as we see it recorded in Luke's Gospel. One of his very first anyway, where Peter is, he's at Capernaum, he's mending the nets of his fishing boat. Here's Jesus with a huge crowd that is gathered on the shore, and Jesus is getting kind of squished up by the crowd. There's really nowhere for him to go. So he asks Peter if he can use his boat as a pulpit. And Peter's happy to oblige, so Jesus stands in the front as Peter rows back and gives a bit of space so Jesus can then speak to the crowd, which he does, I suspect, for an extended time. At the end of it, we're told in the middle of all of this that Peter and his team had been out fishing all night and had caught nothing. And at the end of it, Jesus says to Peter, look, he says, pull out into deeper water, put your net over this side, and there'll be fish. And he thought, okay, I haven't caught anything all night, but I'll give it a go. So pulls the boat out, casts the net out, and it is full. It is so full that he can't pull it in. He calls to his business partners, which would have been James and John, and the two sons of Zebedee, and they'd have been out in their boat to help getting all the fish into the boats. Now, what we see is a kind of repeat of this. Here is Peter and his team. Again, they've been out all night fishing, and just like that first time, they have caught nothing. Zip, zero. And Jesus shows up and says, cast your net on the other side. And the net is so full, they can't drag it in. It's an amazing catch of fish, and there's nothing of the net that is broken. And in both accounts, Jesus calls Peter to follow. And in fact, the first one, as a result of this, we see that Peter is so overwhelmed by what happens, he recognizes something of the power and the holiness of Jesus, that he falls at his feet. And Jesus then summons him to follow him. And not only does he go, so does his brother Andrew, so do James and John. They all follow Jesus. They leave their nets to follow Jesus. And here we have at the other end, 3 years later, here they are with the risen Christ, and in fact enacting in a way the same kind of thing, where Jesus calls Peter to follow. Now here's the thing. Fishing had been Peter's area of expertise. This is the one thing that Peter knew how to do, knew what to do. And yet Jesus demonstrates that he's better at it than even Peter. And both times calls him to follow him. So then we come to what happens around the fire. We see Jesus sitting there after they've eaten, and he says to Peter 3 times, Peter, do you love me? And 3 times Peter responds, of course you know I love you. And there's a kind of mirror here of the 3 denials, which had happened barely a week earlier, as Peter is standing in the courtyard of the high priest's palace, and he is challenged with being a disciple of Jesus. And 3 times he denies that he knows Jesus. And here we have 3 times Jesus asking him, Peter, Peter, do you love me? Do you love me? Now, what's one of the interesting things about this is that in the English, we only have one word for love, and that's love. And it covers a whole broad multitude of meanings. The Hebrews, they have primarily 2 words, hesed and ahav. And one of them, of course, hesed, we know, is unfailing love. It's a very strong word, where the other one is more about liking and being a friend and more that kind of stuff. The Greek has 4 primary words for love, and there are more as well, of quite clear distinctions of what it looks like. And yet in this context, I would imagine that Jesus is speaking in Aramaic, which is a kind of dialect of Hebrew, which would have been their mother tongue. And so we have the gospel that is written in Greek. And it's interesting the words that are used. So that when Jesus first asked Peter, do you love me? He uses the word agapeo, which has a sense of, would you be willing to die for me kind of love. And Peter responds, Lord, you know that I phileo love you. I love you with a sense of passion and of deep friendship. Jesus asks him again, do you agapeo love me? Lord, you know that I phileo love you. And the 3rd time he says, Peter, do you phileo love me? And Peter's deeply hurt, and he says, Lord, you know I phileo love you. Now here's the thing. They wouldn't have heard those words And yet the writer has kind of picked up the distinction of intent with Jesus and with Peter, whether Peter is recognizing it or not. And I suspect there is a place for Peter where he does recognize it. He does recognize the intent of Jesus. But it seems to me, and I could be wrong about this, but it seems to me that Peter still has this recognition of his own failure. The denials of Jesus are still very raw in his heart. And he is now much more wary about making promises that he may find himself wanting and seeking to fulfill. And so he's being perhaps a little cautious. He's doing the best that he can. And Jesus recognizes that. Notice what Jesus says after each affirmation, even though it may be more muted than what he was and less than full-throated that he was looking for. The first one he says, feed my lambs. The second time he says, tend my sheep. The third time he says, feed my sheep. After each time, Jesus is kind of saying, I'm putting you in a place of leadership. Here you are. I'm preparing you. I'm inviting you to step up to being the person that I know you can become. Into the days, the weeks, the months, the years ahead. I know that there's some issues from the past that you're struggling with. I'm wanting you to know that this is attended to. I believe in you, I love you, and I'm inviting you to step forward. Now, there is one other element which I actually find very heartwarming and I think is very significant. There's a Presbyterian, let's call him a scholar, by the name of Darrell Johnson. He's been an international church pastor, which means he's been a pastor in numerous international churches around the world. But he also did quite a stint at Regent College, I think in Toronto in Canada. This is an evangelical postgraduate college. It isn't the Pentecostal Regent College that you might have coming to mind. So he was there, and he has an insight about this particular passage. Darrell Johnson has a profound, the deepest love of anybody I know for the Gospel of John. And what he points to is this coal fire. And he points out, and he's quite right, you can check it out yourself, that the word that is used here, anthrakia, is only used in 2 places in the New Testament. It describes a particular kind of fire, and it is only used twice in the whole of the New Testament. The first time is in John chapter 18. The second time is here. John chapter 18 verse 11 is the fire that Peter is standing around as he denies knowing Jesus. It's a coal fire. It's glowing away there, glowing hot. And as he's warming himself, he is 3 times denying Jesus. And here he is again, sitting beside a glowing coal fire. And each time he is 3 times affirming his love for Jesus and hearing Jesus' affirmation, love and commitment to him and to his future. I wonder how that was for Peter. I wonder at some level when he first came out of the water to approach Jesus sitting on the shore there, and he sees this fire, this charcoal fire, if his mind immediately goes back to the high priest's courtyard. If he finds himself back with this profound sense of shame resting upon him, that when he sees a charcoal fire, this is going to be his default setting. Except that Jesus now changes that. So that when he now sees a charcoal fire, he also thinks about this moment. He thinks about this moment of restoration. He thinks about this moment of commissioning. He thinks about this moment of Jesus' belief in him and calling him to be a leader of the new, about to be formed church into the future. This is Jesus not just giving Peter a new future, it's also at some deep level giving him a new past. So that whenever from now on Peter sees a charcoal fire, it is both with a sense of awareness but also with a sense of joy and a sense of assurance that Jesus has called him, has commissioned him, and has forgiven and set him free for a new beginning. Good news indeed. Amen. God bless you.